Hi everyone and welcome back. So this semester is, kind of really fun for a lot of students because it's the first time you start applying knowledge and becoming actual scientists and learning how to collect data and become researchers. And this is exciting because it takes you to the next level of wherever you want to go in your studies. Maybe it takes you to that level of doctorate someday where you do this for corporations such as MITRE, Westinghouse, or many of the other government agencies we all know so well in the area. Think of the CDC. These are all the ways they do tests on their sites to help people learn how to take advantage of healthcare knowledge. That's something that's very special out there today. So let's dive into user task analysis a little deeper and understand where your project's going to go and how this is going to happen. First, everyone needs to think about usability and what it actually means. First, it's making sure that something works. And doesn't just work, it's excellent. It gets the user straight to the task with the goals in mind. It thinks of the average person's ability and how their experiences in the past of other sites have helped them get this far, and how you can use other people's sites. Remember, we never break the wheel. We always just kind of remodify it, expand on it, and make it better to make the site better and a better interface users' attitudes towards these pieces. The interface use is for intended purposes only. We shouldn't be directing them all over the big World Wide Web. We should be just thinking of our tasks in mind. What do we want them to do? What is the task? What is the goal? We have to make sure we don't get them lost or frustrated, because this ends up getting the users to leave our site. And if you're working for a company, it's the last thing you want them to do. So if we think of this in mind, the web application should really explain themselves. It should be very clean, very simple, and very visually direct. Look at this page I designed here. It's very simple. The whites bring you in and frame the brown area. We can see this. And I have very simple bullet points, not overwhelming in text to read. 1 point each. Usually they say the rule is 7 is probably the highest thing you want to go on in any web page. So you want to try to keep them as clean and simple as possible. When users are looking at a web page, it should be one, self-evident what they're going for or where they should be directed to. Obvious in the flow and motion. You can see mine is kind of down and out. Why I left this longer line so it leads you out and makes you want to hit the button to turn. It should be self-explanatory and self-directed. The visual direction should have a flow. This is where we think about our media arts and our graphic designers, where they come in mind to make sure everything flows. If you're in the US, we like to think things of an L. If you look at this, it kind of flows in an L pattern because we like to think from top left to right diagonally, or top left down and then out. Vice versa, if you're in the Middle East, they would think right to left, and their design would want to go this way. We like pleasing patterns in the shape of S's as well, or reverse S's if we are in the United States. So you want to have a clear visual direction and make sure the colors don't distract. Look at my colors, very simple. 2 here, essentially black and white, but I made it a little less harsh and made it a softer brown earthy tone because I like those tones myself. They mean good, they mean nature, they mean wholesome, they mean learning, things that you like, earth, happiness. So think of color coordination. We should also make sure we are free of gender and other discriminations. Make sure that you're not being mean to some group. Make sure that your text is not too small that it can't be visually viewed by senior citizens. Make sure everybody has accessibility to the site. One of my favorite authors is Krug, and he always says when he's looking at things, and I love to point this out, that we should really think about how we don't make users think. And why am I doing this? I'm ignoring you for a reason. In and out, up and down. Don't do things that distract a user. Don't make them think. Like, man, I got to catch this screen. I got to stop this screen. A lot of people like to design bells and whistles and flashes and too many movements in. It distracts people. It distracts users. It creates puzzles on what they're supposed to do. So eliminate the puzzles in design. Be direct in your visual cues. If you have motion, have it come up, stop, and freeze. That directs someone to say, okay, I'm to read now, I'm to look now, I'm to do something now. This builds confidence. Don't waste the user's time. The interfaces should save time. It should be simple and direct. You shouldn't have 14 different pages to get to one point. If I want to buy a book on Amazon, I click Books. I search my book. I search to the one I want. I put it in my basket. If you looked at the progression of Amazon's websites over the years, it has, yes, shrank in what users do. Before they would have 15, 16 tabs. Now it's down to a few, or one, or two. They want you to keep moving. We think of ourselves and users as sharks on the internet. We're constantly wanting to move and go. But you always want to be able to have that ability for someone to click back, because we like our back buttons that take us back to that starting point. So it's something to think about. We are creatures of habits. If we find something we like, especially a website, we go back to it because it becomes friendly. We have a cognitive recognition of the designs. So if you're doing a design, you want to keep something that works in that design and never eliminate something that users like. Interfaces are a way to be sociable. I say this because we are interacting with this. It's a relationship, and you want to continue that relationship. So don't take away something you find the users like. Remember the fact that users always form these mental site maps. And we always have a rote memory, we call it, our RAM in the computer terms. But users have this ability to remember the conceptual hierarchy of how something happens. We log into Amazon. If we need to sign in, we sign in. It's up in the right-hand corner. It's always the same place. You want to keep that same way. We want to be able to retrace our steps that we used in the past. So if we're making changes, even though the design might change, try to keep the buttons in the same place or nearby. You also should have a way to make it easy to go home. So if they want to start over, they get frustrated, they can easily go back. Always make the icons a click back. The home button should be right in sight at all times. They need reassurance if they get lost, and that's okay as long as we get them back to the point of starting over. We always want to keep them on our site, not make them change. So let's think about the scientific adventure we're all going to go on. We're going to start doing UTAs, user task analysis. There's 5 phases in this and 5 reports we'll all be doing together. The first is we're going to find a site. We're going to use our college's website, and you're going to pick as a team a task. And this task might be as simple as finding a book in the library, or finding a PDF in the library, or registering for a course, or finding out what courses are available this semester. Or you might be asking your user to do something like log into their email, log into their registrar. This is a task. So the first thing you will do is define a task, a single task, as a group, to start setting up the parameters of your first report. And the first report, I've kind of labeled these out so you can come back to this. I strongly suggest taking notes through this point to help you. The first is you're going to define that point, and you're going to test, you're going to collect data, and you're going to compare that data and make your first report. The second one will be understanding the user's data a little bit more clearly. We'll be boiling it down and charting and graphing. We'll use that to go into the third to make a prototype or a paper model for changes. From that data spiral, we'll collect more data from our prototype by testing the prototype again and understanding user suggestion to make a final prototype and a final UTA exam, which will end up being the final prototype and modification that we would suggest. If all goes well, we'll turn this entire report in to the college, and maybe they'll take on our suggestions. So the first thing you need to think about is really your task. We need to find a site task that we want to accomplish. We need to understand who our users are. Specifically, if you're going to test how a student understands getting a PDF from the library, you'd want to use students that are currently enrolled. If you want to understand how faculty get to their email, you have to talk to faculty. If you want to understand how maintenance gets to their schedule for the day, you'd have to talk to a maintenance worker. So we're making sure our users are in the correct frame. We want to test the correct people. The second thing is, once we identify who we want to test, we have to prepare a script for the actual user task analysis. If you'd like, I strongly suggest going to Steve Krug's book. The 2010 model is fine. You can get it used. It should be in the library. Or the 2000 book of Rocket Surgery Made Easy, or Don't Make Me Think. In the backs of his book, he always has a script prepared for you as a user to learn, and you can modify it and change it. It's a simple way of, one, telling the users this is voluntary. They can quit, stop, or leave at any time, and this is okay because you record that data. They need to sign a release, so you need to have a testing release saying, I understand this is voluntary, and I'm able and willing to do this with my own mind. If you're planning on using a photo or video or auditory methods, you must have them sign a release stating that they understand they're being recorded or videotaped or photographed and allowing you to do this. And this is voluntary as well. So this is part of the report you'll have. You will design this little first script of what you're going to say, because you're always going to repeat the same things. That way it doesn't change the experiment. It doesn't change from the users. You will have 5 users, 5 different data sources. At the lowest you can ever do is 3. Krug suggests 3 to 5. I would like you to do 5. These will not take very long. In most cases, these user task analysis should only probably take the user 15 minutes. It'll be something you want to time first with yourselves and tell the user how long it will take, and that there is no wrong answers, and that you appreciate their time. You're going to collect the data on all 5 users, and you're going to tell them that you're going to come back to them 3 to 4 different times, because you're trying to fix problems that may or may not be there. So you'll want to use the same people so you get the different reactions throughout the whole process. So make sure you have access to these users again. While you're collecting this, you're going to end up spiraling down the day into the common themes and frustrations and issues. So this first part we want to think about a little bit deeper. We have to have the script ready. This will only take you a short period of time and your task. So once you have the script, you should have one moderator speak at all times. So one person in a group will be the speaker. That way it doesn't cause confusion for the user if 4 or 5 voices are coming around. You must use the same person for all tests. They must explain the task and the goal, ask permission, and explain it's voluntary. You must follow the same path as you're doing this. The rest of the team will listen and watch. They're not to direct, not to help the user. If something happens and the user cannot identify or move forward, you need to record this data. If it gets too frustrating, you stop the user task analysis and thank the user. Failure is good. This means there's a problem that we can fix. We never want to get a user so frustrated that they won't come back. Remember to reward and thank them, and do a debrief. If there's something right away you saw like this happen where they couldn't get forward, they couldn't get anywhere, stop them and talk to them. Say, can you explain to us why you're frustrated? Can you explain what this meant when you hit the computer with your fist? Or why you just kept clicking the mouse? Can you explain why you went back to the home page 4 times? This is called a debriefing after it. It allows you to get more data and write it down and understand meanings. You also have to define the users here in your report. Define who they are and the goal of it. Defining how they are looking at the context of the test. Define the starting points and the finishing points of where you started and they stopped, or if they went right away and jumped further than what you expected. Explain this. When you're defining the task to them, tell them exactly what you're testing. We're trying to see what it takes for you to log into a class. You want to understand time, so you time everything. Mark down any complications. Mark down the number of clicks, the frustrations, the happiness, the ease, the clarity. If they give you visual cues like smiles, you want to record that. If they frown, record it. If they smirk, if they record it. If they have visual constructions like, wow, they want to go in and they want to blow the screen up by making it larger, you need to say that they needed it larger. If they move in towards the screen physically, you might want to say and take note that the user had to move towards the screen to see the text, or at that point ask, why are you moving in towards the screen? And they might say, well, this color is very hard to see, or I can't see the text here, or I can't find this. These are all things you'll want to cue, and the moderator, again, is the only person that's asking these questions. Steve Krug's theory says, 1, we watch and learn. All areas should be covered visually. You have to have the moderator, which usually sits to this one of the two sides or stands in front. If in the front, the two sides should be covered, and someone from the back. Why? Because this gives you a full 360 view of what is going on, so you can capture facial smirks, gestures, shoulder shrugs, moving back and forth in the seat, which could show frustration or boredom. You want to write all these cues down from the user. You want to keep a tally if they're doing something repetitively, like blinking or smiling or smirking or growling, and keep a tally of how many times they're doing this. Write down all the visual cues of their body moving in and out away from the screen, shrugging their shoulders, punching the computer. I don't know what will happen. I've had everything happen. Write down the number of clicks or how many times they stop, they back away from the screen, they wait, or they use the back button. And again, debrief the user. If you see something right away that happened, that you had to stop it, talk to them, find out what it is, and say, we're going to debrief now. We saw this happen. You seem to be very angry at this point. Can you explain this to us? Or we saw you have a lot of frustration. You kept shrinking up your one eyebrow and scowling at the screen. Why were you doing that? These are all cues that will help you in this first report to really make an understanding of what the user's data is about. So the first report's going to be a lot of work. It's where it really comes to the basis. You'll break down all the data, and I suggest making a chart. You'll give me a copy of the written script. You'll take the notes from the video or photos you did as well. You'll write down this description of all the visual cues. Describe the facial gestures. So you may have a bullet point in your report and say, a scowl was recognized by a smirking face and an uplifted eyebrow. A smile was by a full smile showing teeth, or a minimal smile was by a little half smile, or a frown was seen as this. So you want to define your gestures, and you can do this part in bullet points. So while you're talking about them in your report 1, I understand. You can do this as an appendage as well. That's something that goes in the back of the report, which at the end I would like you to have for the final report an appendage. So I strongly suggest you start this right away on report 1. It will make your life easier. This is describing what the actions mean and the artifacts uncovered mean. You're defining them as a common in your group of what you acknowledge the meanings are. We may not see this the same. I may not recognize it. As long as your group says, this is what this gesture, this visual cue, this motion meant, this auditory burp meant by the users. Then we're going to spiral the data down really hard the next week. So you'll have a large point of time in the next week to take all this and make it into a charted graph about what it means. You're going to find the common goods and bads. Understand the visual cues. Maybe you count them and you can come up with an actual number from them. Understand the voice cues. You'll look at the graphic common cues, the smiles, the frowns, the voiced yucks, the clicks, the distractions, the back buttons, the anger, the sadness, maybe the move towards the screens. Maybe they said this is really small text. This is where your second report comes in. You're going to explain what all this data means to you. So you'll go back to the meanings that you're defining in the first week in your script, and you're going to describe how you've charted this data. And you're going to create common themes. And maybe you'll come up with 2-3 themes that says users don't like the colors, or users can't find the buttons, users have a difficult time reading the text, there's too much text, users get lost. These are common themes that'll happen. From these themes is where we're going to create, you got it gang, our first paper prototype. And you'll be doing this, and you can make a small cool style prototype from the screenshot and saying how you'd like to alter it. Give me a copy of the original and what you're going to do. But first you have to look at what that data means. What actually frustrated the users from getting to that task or the goal. Don't fix things that are not broken. Don't look for things to be broken, because sometimes they're not. If there's memory cues that you've seen that the users are using, bring them in. Or if they say somewhere, I like this, I saw it at this site, and you're debriefing, you may want to go to that site, take a screenshot, and add that in as why you're going to build it into your prototype. If they say they like something, parts of the site, explain that. Design inside of this idea a prototype on paper. I suggest making 2 models. Your group can do 1, which is fine too, but I suggest 2 because it's easier to have 2 suggestions. 1 is acceptable. From this, you'll design this paper model and give me a copy. And you got it. This is going to be taken back to your original users. You're going to test the same users with your new paper prototype model. And again, they're going to look at it and go, oh, okay. So you'll need a new script saying this is what we did before and we understood from what we heard from you. We hope this is correct. Let them explain if it is or not. And from this, we created a paper prototype. We'd like you to look at this prototype and understand if this is easier or harder to get to your task. And again, let them explain. Watch how they move across the paper with their fingers and what they suggest. This is going to bring us into our third report. Understanding the prototype's meanings. What did the users say? Did they like something that you changed? Did they like something you suggested? Did they suggest changing it again, making it larger or smaller? These are all things that will bring us to that next level. So from this, and when we understand what's happening in our paper prototype, we can take all the suggestions and again modify, you got it, and collect data again. We looked at the suggestions, described the good and bad, we refined the prototype in a paper model, and you discussed why you did so. Make all this very clear in report 4. And then you can move into a final prototype. And this is a revision of your prototype. The final test and the final paper is going to be a revision of the final prototypes. Maybe it suggests looking at further research on other sites to compare because this one is a total failure. We don't know. So you're going to bring back the paper model that's modified again one more time to your users, thank them, and ask them now to see if everything works for them, if this is clear. Describe any thoughts that are good or bad. In this, you'll have a final paper of complications of everything that you've done in all 4 papers, and the final section will be final prototype testing and conclusion. This will be added on with all the other chapters, 1 through 4, and put at the end. Your paper will show a final proposal for a prototype change, if there is one. You'll suggest why, you'll explain why, and what the meanings were associated to get to this point. And finally, you'll have concluding thoughts. How should the next researchers look at this? What should they do? What would you do if you guys are going to the next stage? Would it be another page? Would it be altering, changing what? These are concluding thoughts. We always do this in research so that someone else can pick right up. And you also want to have a copy of your interview, a copy of your scripts. Oops, sorry gang. So that everybody can see fully what you did and replicate your study. Scientific experiments must be able to repeat it again. So inside of this, you want to also stage and maybe put it in your appendages with your meanings of the artifacts and words and signals. You may want to describe the environment and the context that you used, so that if I need to repeat this as a scientist, I can do so as well. That's where great science comes from. If we're looking at this, describe the room, describe the day, the time, the light, the computer, the keyboard. These are all attributes that would be needed to replace and do the study again and replicate it. So this will be another final part that you would say in your concluding thoughts. Please see our appendage on how to replicate. Here is how we did this. In the room, everything you would want to explain. This is not too hard. It should be rather fun and rewarding. And at the end, once this paper's all together, if we have something great, which I've seen in other classes, we'll submit it to the college's dean and see what happens from there. And if we are taken seriously, which I know we all will be because we are all scientists now, we'll see changes actually made in the real world. Gang, I'm looking totally forward to this project. Please talk to me when you can about it, and I will be looking forward to your first reports. Remember, we're all learning together. This should be a great team effort. I'll be putting out team names soon and posting them. Let's have a great day, everyone. Get outside, enjoy the sun, ride a bicycle, walk your dog, walk your neighbor's dog. Go to a shelter and make a difference. Play with the cats, walk a dog. Do something to change one of the animals' lives that are in a shelter. Make yourself feel really good today. Be a volunteer. I asked everyone this all the time at the end of my lectures because it's good to care about other people in our community. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you again soon.